experts will be with you shortly.
Welcome to Irwin Mitchell. Sarah speaking. How can I help?
Hi, yeah, I had a bit of a nightmare when I tried to get through yesterday, but my new smartphone was apparently on Wi-Fi calling, and it just kept cutting off every time.
Okay.
Now I've sorted that problem, I hope. So I was put through to someone called Cedra to try and start discussing.
Right. And was it a new inquiry, sorry?
Yes, I'm looking for a consultation, but I need quite a long one, basically.
Right. And what was your inquiry regarding, sorry?
It's to do with two historical cases of child abuse and how human rights of the children involved and myself were abused and ignored by local and national authorities.
Okay. May I just take your name, please?
Yes, that's right.
Hello, my name is Janet. I'm part of the new inquiries team for abuse matter. Yeah, right? Perfect, thank you. So, my colleague mentioned this is about child abuse.
Yeah, well, there's two sort of separate cases, so they're not unrelated for me, unfortunately. But the first is to do with the fact that my mother illegally took my son from me, first in 2004 for several months, and then back in 2005 when I had taken him out of school and became very concerned. He had originally been diagnosed as dyspraxic, but I started to suspect once I had more information that he was autistic, but I also had concerns that he had brain damage because of severe memory deficits and other issues that were going on, and my mother's actions actively prevented and delayed me trying to get help, which I didn't get anyway either, because doctors ignored my concern and abused me in a variety of ways. And yeah, in the winter of 2005, she took him, and that became permanent, and I've hardly seen him since. In 2012, because he had become epileptic, because I had asked, I was denied a brain scan for him in 2005, and then he became epileptic at the beginning of 2010, and scans show that he does have brain damage, which may or may not have been caused or contributed to by his father's violence to me during my pregnancy. Once I read about autism, a lot of issues that I'd had with his father, it became clear to me that he was autistic too. But I also think there's autism on my side of the family. Now there's a lot more understood. I'm probably an undiagnosed autistic woman myself. My circumstances have been made complicated because the first time my mother took my son, I had an accident and slipped on my stairs, and it was not picked up at the time that I'd crushed two of the discs in my spine. That was at the end of 2004, and it wasn't until 2007 I started getting very severe leg pains, and then a scan showed that I had crushed two discs, and I had to have a lumbar laminectomy. I was all right I had that in 2008. I was all right for the next 12 years. Then abuse from my neighbours made me too scared to be in my house, and that aggravated it. And I now have undiagnosed Cowdery-Quiner syndrome, which I haven't been able to walk for more than about a minute since 2013, sorry. But then also in 2009, I started vomiting very, very frequently. I was terrified. I had stomach cancer at the time. I was treated for pylori, for sort of like stomach ulcer, even though very clearly that wasn't what I had. And it took until 2020 for me to be diagnosed with, for me to find out about cyclic vomiting syndrome, which as soon as I read it was like, okay, this is what has been going on. So I've vomited more than 10,000 times since 2009, which it's a life-destroying condition, quite fairly rare, though it's now understood to be part of the autistic spectrum problems as well, or is thought to be. I mean, there's still not an awful lot known about it. So yeah, that has hampered my life, along with the fact that no one has listened to me or looked at any of the evidence that I had. I did in 2012. I had tried to get legal help for years and was just ignored. When my son became epileptic, there were issues. His father, who has basically drugged him since he was 14 years old with cannabis, on a day, for most of every day, basically, thanks to my mother's criminal acts in the first place. Sorry, there's so much to this story, and this is why I would kind of like a long consultation, because it's all very upsetting for me. But I managed to be granted a hearing by the Court of Protection because I was trying to protect my son's financial things. He had been denied benefits that he should have been entitled to in his own right, and it had taken it. It was only when he became epileptic that I was able to get him disability benefits. But then, after I bumped into him and he said, "Oh, you don't need to worry about me and money, Mum. I've got a couple of grand in the bank," and took me to the cash point, and he had £11,000 in there. And I'm like, he's prime for being ripped off by people, because, as I say, he has very serious memory deficits. In my applications to Court of Protection and other stuff I'd mentioned, I had a question that I asked people at the time, as someone with an imaginative capacity, try and imagine what it's like not to have one, because I understood that was part of what was happening with my son. It wasn't until the pandemic in 2020 that I started seeing references to aphantasia on YouTube, and then only about a year and a half ago that I saw stuff about severe autobiographical memory deficits, because my son has long and short-term memory deficits going on all over the place, basically. But yeah, his father, my mother basically, as soon as she was able, dumped my son in the local youth foyer, and then he was eventually given a council flat, which his father moved into a couple of months after, and has been dealing dope from there ever since, and that's made it very difficult for me to have any contact with my son, apart from the fact that, most of the people he knows since my mother took him have told him not to contact me for various reasons, and that I'm trying to control his life, when actually what I was doing was trying to protect both our rights, because, my mother committed one of the most serious crimes there is by taking my child and, as I say, actively preventing him from getting medical treatment or help that would be necessary. So that's one case. The second case is to do with, in 2016, in 2015, a new neighbour moved in, and it became apparent to me that she was abusing her toddler quite severely. I think he was about 15 months old when they moved in. Because of my own previous experiences, the fact that all my reports to police and social services and doctors and everyone else that I could think of in relation to my son had been ignored, I was quite hesitant to have any dealings with them at all. I did report it to the Housing Society within a few months, and that was ignored. And then a year later, there was some row going on between the boyfriend she had at the time, who was not the son's father, and other people reported on it. So I again reported, that she was basically torturing this poor little child, because I've had bad neighbours that shout at kids before, and but this was on a very different level, and I was told I was doing the right thing. I talked to social services, I talked to the police, they told me to keep reporting it, which I then did, only to be verbally assaulted by a police officer, and I had a heart attack directly after he had left, after telling me I was too stupid to press a button on the phone and record it, which I had tried to do, but I had a very old BlackBerry for many years, and it just wasn't up to the task. After I came out of hospital, I bought recording equipment that could listen through walls and record it, and basically recorded it for the next year and a half, during which time, because I made an official complaint against the policeman, my housing society tried to make me homeless. I put up some posters because I ended up having to go and have another stent put in 6 months later, and I was terrified that I might die, and I put up about half a dozen posters around where I live, which were almost all immediately taken down, but because it named some of the people from the housing society as negligent in their duties, they tried to make me homeless. I was later accused of harassing my neighbour. I was taken to the magistrates' court and the county court. The magistrates, while she was there with the new baby, which from a different boyfriend that she had also started to abuse when her boyfriend was out of the house, she just basically lied. The solicitor, I did get different legal aid solicitors for both cases in that case, and they both, basically everybody else involved, all the services involved, all assisted her in continuing her abuse of her child. I have hundreds of recordings. The housing society also told them, once I knew that I had these recordings because I had posted one on Facebook, they deliberately told the neighbours to play their music as loudly as possible, which is a very abusive form of torture for me, as well as having to ongoingly listen to this poor child who was basically shut in an 8-foot by 8-foot room for most of the first 3 years of his life. And she would, when her boyfriend was living there, she didn't sort of hit him except when he went out of the house, but she was hitting him. They just, denied him kind of barely any food, toys. He was just shut in a room for most of 3 years with nothing in there in the winter, no light, no ability to reach a light switch, nothing to drink, because with the first boyfriend, I wake up very, very early in the morning and start vomiting or not, and then I would hear the poor little boy wake up and start banging on his bedroom door, and that would go on for about 5 hours, and her first boyfriend wouldn't even get up until at least midday. So, anyway. And I have hundreds of hours of evidence which the police and social services said didn't constitute evidence. The magistrates at the magistrate court refused to listen to me, put a gagging order on me for 2 years and fined me £1,000. The housing society tried to make me homeless, but they weren't successful in that. And I would have been driven to suicide by the end of 2017 if the housing society rewarded them with a new house to continue her vile torture of her children. And I've been extremely isolated. I've spent 12 years now with almost no human contact because of the way I have been abused by my family and friends and relevant authorities, and been ignored by lawyers, journalists. I've tried dozens and dozens of times to try and find help from somewhere and not received it. So and I know the very complicated situations they contributed to by the medical negligence in the case of my son being refused a brain damage, being refused a brain scan, which would have stopped my mother from, getting away with her crimes if that had happened in 2005. But also my Aquinas syndromes has been, also have evidence of how that was ignored as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Simona, for everything you've told me. I do appreciate your time, and thank you for discussing this with us, even though it does sound really difficult what you've been through over the years. Bless you.
Very complicated, and I know I have a tendency to overwhelm people with information, which I know has been part of the problem.
It's fine.
My circumstances have just carried on getting more and more. And I have great fears I'm going to die, because some of the tests I had in 2021 to rule out the possibility of other problems with the vomiting showed that I have a completely blocked abdominal aorta as well, which if that turns into an aneurysm, I'll be dead within a few minutes, basically. I don't know. I don't know even if I can find someone who will listen to me and or look at any of my evidence, whether I'll be able to survive long enough for the judicial process, if I can get any help to get me there. But also my mother is going to be 80 in a few months, so whether she will get away with the crime she's committed against myself and my son. I'm not sure either, but I'd like someone to listen to me. And
yes, thank you. Do appreciate it, Simona. So let me just go through some facts with you, Simona. In regards to your mom, you mentioned that she illegally took your son from you, which caused a delay in diagnosis for your son. Bless him. Right, okay. So that aspect of things, Simona, it wouldn't be one we can assist with. And you mentioned some medical negligence as well for your son. So putting the timing into consideration, that medical negligence wouldn't be one we can assist with as well, just because it happened a long time ago.
I'm aware of all these issues, but what are you meant to do? If people abuse you and then your circumstances become so complicated, I'm aware of this. I'm not an unintelligent person. I understand what the difficulties are, but kidnapping a child is one of the most serious crimes there is. I can't go to the police or trust the police, or I did. I did reported it various times and was just ignored. So what are you meant to do? If someone steals your child and nobody listens to you or understands what has happened, where are you meant to turn? My son has nearly died after I'd had the heart attack when the policeman abused me. 6 weeks later, my son had a seizure and a broken skull. When he went to hospital, that wasn't the issue. He was having some reaction to his medication, which he had not mentioned to anyone as far as I know, or if he had, he wasn't listened to either. And some of his blood mineral levels were basically at fatal levels, so he could have died. When he first became epileptic, I have to be grateful for the fact that his father had moved into his flat, even though it was against my son's repeatedly expressed wishes, because he would have died that day. He had 3 major fits, went into status epilepticus, and if he had been there by himself, as my mother intended, my son would probably have died in 2010. I know how difficult my situation is. I'm just desperate for someone to actually give me some time and listen to me, because I know how complex it is. I know how stuck I am. I know how all these procedures, I do understand how dire my own circumstances are, and like I say, that I may well die, but I'm still trying to get someone to listen to me. And I can afford to pay, I can afford to pay for someone to listen to me for several hours. I've got enough savings at the moment.
So, Simona, it's not about the funding at this stage, but the criteria of the matters we're able to take on. And these something just fall into that criteria. Can I just suggest to you, Simona, to talk to the Law Society about this?
I've been sorry, please don't tell me to do stuff without having asked, and I don't mean to have a go at you, but I have tried all of these options. I've tried everything I can for more than 20 years now since my mother took my son, and I've not been listened to. This is like I say, and most of what I get is at the most this, half an hour on a telephone, and then no one gets back to me. I've done these things repeatedly. I went down to the private eye offices last week and hand-delivered a letter. I've tried to do them before. I tried posting in their small ads in 2022 again, because I was so scared. My vomiting got so bad in 2022, I was really terrified I was going to end up puking myself to death, and I was trying to get help. All of my pleas for help have been ignored. So like I say, what I'm trying to get is a consultation of at least a couple of hours for someone to just listen to me. I do understand. I understand about the timings. I understand difficult legal processes, you know what I mean? But my human rights, again, were abused by the Court of Protection, because when I got to the Court of Protection, I turned up for the hearing and was told that the judge had vacated the case pending an inspector's report. And I had the week before delivered 2 box files of evidence, which it had taken me years to gather, because my son cannot consistently understand, and sometimes he gets very angry with me because of things that other people have said to him, and then other times he's sympathetic to me. But I know that he, you know, in legal terms, lacks mental capacity because of his memory deficits and his brain damage. Those were ignored by the inspector. The inspector was sent to Cambridge. 3 months later, I was not given permission to talk to him, and it wasn't until 2 months after that that I found out that the Court of Protection, I was told that the judge had ordered all my evidence destroyed 10 days after the hearing was vacated, but actually I suspect what happened is that because the court was in the process of moving to the Royal Courts of Justice, when I went to deliver the stuff, I was shocked at the ramshackle state of their offices, which just had stacks of documents, and I think that the court had lost or accidentally destroyed my evidence, and that was why the judge vacated the case, and I was never allowed to speak to him, you know, or the inspector.
Yeah. So, I'm really sorry, Simona. This wouldn't be something we're able to assist with, I'm afraid, okay?
Well, who in this country are you meant to go to if you have such serious crimes committed against you? Where are you meant to turn? Because I have tried everything I can think of. I've tried disability charities, groups. I've sent out emails to dozens and dozens of people and just been ignored.
I'm sorry to hear that, Simona. I am sorry to hear that, but this wouldn't be one for us, okay? Yeah. I'll send some signposting information, just some information that could help into your email address, if that's all right, okay?
No, I mean, it's not all right for me. You know, it's not all right for me because you'll send me and or tell me to do something that I've already tried and just been ignored.
I do appreciate
well, anyway, I've recorded this phone call. I'll put it on my website, and I'll probably just have to fucking disappear because no one cares. No one cares. And no one cares about the children involved in these circumstances. Those children will have continued to be tortured since 2016, you know, because of what's happened. I don't know what I'm meant to do. I don't know what I'm meant to do anymore.
I'm sorry about this, Simona.
No one's sorry about it. If someone's actually sorry, they actually help you, and no one will help me, and I don't know what I'm meant to do anymore. Okay, bye.
I do